Welcome everybody to this webinar, Cloud-Based Agricultural Modeling. Before we start the presentation and demonstration that we want to give in this webinar, I would like to introduce myself and my colleagues. My name is Rob Lopez. I work as a project lead for Wageningen University and research on this project. And my other colleagues.
Yes, hello from me as well. My name is Rob Knapen and I also work at Wageningen University and Research as a software developer basically, and I also participated in this AGINFRA Plus project.
My name is Steven Hoek. I work as a data scientist at Wageningen University and Research.
So, first of all, about the contents of this webinar. I will start with a short introduction about the project that we have been working on, AGINFRA Plus, and about virtual research and virtual research environments. Rob Knapen and Steven Hoek will give some demonstrations about the work that we did within this virtual research environment to give you a bit of an impression of what you can do with those environments. We will also have a short Q&A session at the end, and possibly during the session, once questions come in. You can submit questions through the screen of this webinar. And I also want to ask you, we will send you an evaluation after this seminar, after this webinar by mail. We would like to ask you to fill that in so we can get some impression about your feelings of our work and the VRE and how we can improve that in the future. I will come back to that later, but for us, quite an important thing. So first of all, what is AGINFRA Plus? First of all, it's a European research project which tries to improve virtual research in the agri-food sector. That's one thing, but maybe more important is also a group of research communities that tries to bring forward virtual research in the agri-food sector, working on topics like food safety and food security, and trying to develop applications within virtual research environments, trying to evaluate those and trying to improve virtual research and open science as a whole. Last but not least, AGINFRA Plus is also a virtual research environment and infrastructure that we can use to do our research. It allows research groups to work collaboratively, it allows them to develop, test and share and reuse data and analytics, and it offers access to all kinds of European computing and storage resources. If we shortly summarize what virtual research is, then it's about four things, I think. It's about collaboration, first of all, so allowing you to work together in the cloud as a group of researchers, even if you're distributed in teams all over the world. Then the development and automation of research, so the actual data science, publish and sharing of both analytics and data. So the sharing of your work with others, so others can reuse it. And last but not least, also a way to scale up your research, because we have a lot of computing and storage resources behind those virtual research infrastructures. We can also provide you with more resources to scale up your research. Shortly about all those aspects. First of all, well, partly because not all of it will come back explicitly in our demonstrations, so it's a good overview, I think. About collaboration, what you see here is what you get if you log into one of those virtual research environments. It's a dashboard, and you can see in the middle that you have some social media functions. So it allows you to submit messages to your fellow researchers and allows them to react on that. On the right you see the access points to various virtual research environments, so environments that are shared by groups of researchers to do their work. And you also see some on the left, some ways to share data. So we have a shared storage space where you can share data and analytics and thus work together. What you see here, I don't go extensively into that because that is part of our demonstrations. There's a lot of analytics functions within those virtual environments that are available. We can use notebooks, for instance, in RStudio or in Jupyter. That's one thing. The other thing is that once you have developed your algorithms, you can also deploy them through this function data miner, which will also come back in the demonstration. So this allows you to deploy your algorithms and to also share them with fellow researchers. Visualization also, of course, an important aspect of data science. There are various ways to visualize your results. What you see here is a dashboard that we developed in our use case. It shows, among others, spatial visualization, so visualization of maps, but also visualization of time series. And that will also come back in the demonstrations. One thing which is not directly related to the demonstrators, but is an important function to support data scientists is this. This is a tracking system for issues. So you are able to register your issues with your work and let's say, register and track the progress on all kinds of issues. If you look at publish and share, well, part of open science, which is something that we want to advance here, is that you share your work with others so they can reuse it. So the system, one of the central things in the system is the catalog. Whatever you do, if you produce analytics or if you have data that you want to publish, you can just publish it in the catalog and it becomes available to your research team, but also to the whole world through the external catalog. Last but not least, upscaling of research. D4Science offers a cloud-based infrastructure, like I said. The core of it is that it offers VREs as a service. So you can just apply for a VRE and the technicians behind it will offer you the tools that you need for your specific research. Behind this VRE is a large amount of computing clusters and shared storage, so you don't have to worry about not having enough capacity to do your calculations, for instance. There's also ways to monitor the resource and the users of resources, and of course there's ways to host your research data and to share it and to curate it. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to this website. It's called d4science.org, and you will see also a lot of virtual research environments that are already currently online. Maybe a last thing to say about our work before we start with the demonstrations. We use two important, let's say, external resources. The first one is Agro-Datacube. Agro-Datacube is a big repository that supplies data on agriculture for the Netherlands. It has data about parcels, about weather, about soil, about crops, about the cultivation of parcels, and about remote sensing related to agricultural parcels. You can see the link over here, and it's one of the main data sources we have used for our demonstrations. The other thing that is important here is the Wofost crop growth model, which is a well-renowned crop growth model used in a lot of applications worldwide. And for this purpose, we extended it to a cloud-based environment, Wofost Cloud, and integrated it into a virtual research environment also to make it able to do parallel computing. And this Wofost model again uses the Agro-Datacube previously mentioned as one of its main data sources. So with that, I would like to give the word to my colleague Stephen Hoek, who will do the first demonstration.
Thank you, Rob. The demonstration that we are going to give is about the environment. That is a Jupyter Notebook environment, and I hope you will enjoy it.
And in this data miner functionality,
we are going to talk about how we have developed a Jupyter notebook for and later an algorithm for running on the VRE. And as we mentioned before, you can run Jupyter notebooks on the VRE, develop them together. I'll show you here that we have logged on to the VRE, and this is the menu where you can say, okay, we are going to go to Jupyter at AGI or AGI. It takes a bit of time to start this, so we will not waste time now, but this is the environment you are now looking at, and this environment, as we mentioned, allows you to work together on the development of Jupyter notebooks. In this case, we have used the Python language to do so. We apply this to crop phenology. That means we use satellite data to look at a vegetation index, NDVI, which usually has this kind of shape for the data. Of course, we need a time series with observations on a regular basis. Otherwise, we may miss part of this curve, and it will be difficult to fit. Okay, so we used two sources for obtaining this satellite information. We used in the first place the Agro-Data Cube, which is especially available for the Netherlands, and then besides we used Sentinel Hub data, which are available for the whole of Europe. And we combine this information from satellite with parcel data, so we have to somehow know the size and the shape of the parcel and where it is located. So in this case, we have these coordinates for a particular parcel somewhere in the Netherlands, and we in this notebook we use this data to find out the data, to retrieve the data for this parcel. We developed this algorithm then to do some kind of curve fit, as the name says, and to obtain that function that really shows the course of the curve. So here you can see it. We have ignored these observations here, and the curve follows more or less what we expected. I would like to switch to another workbook now that I developed. So we have switched to another workbook. Yeah, it is about the same plot actually, and in this case we are going to add another aspect to it, that is we obtain some meteorological data from a nearby meteor station. Here you can see some of it, and then here are the meteor data, and let's have a look at the curve again first. This is the curve of the observations, and then you see here the curve that we fitted. Now there are particular points in the course of the season that we have found. This is the start of the season. This is where the curve changes. Here it still goes up more, but the second derivative probably changes at this point, and then so this is the point that we consider as an indicator for canopy closure. This is the point where the maximum level of the NDVI is reached, and this is where we assume the harvest will take place. So these are the crop phenology points that we are interested in. And for agronomists, these figures are already meaningful. Besides, we can also derive from this other things that we may like to use. And in this case, I want to show how we could derive t-sums or growing degree days from this curve. And that is why I retrieved the meteorological data, which we can now see in this picture here. This is the average temperature, and first we estimate on which day this point occurs, and then for this point, and then this point is somewhere 3/4 between maximum NDVI and harvest. Well, that's a rough estimate, but you see here that this is where the maturity of the crop is reached. After this, it is withering, and the greenness is disappearing. So this is what we are taking as the maturity point. So the temperatures that are realized in the period between this point and this point, that is the first figure that we are interested in. That is the t-sum 1, as we call it, and between this point and this point there's another t-sum. That is the sum of the temperatures for those days for that period. So we obtain t-sum 1 and t-sum 2. And the good thing of those values, here we can see the values. Maybe they are not very realistic, but at least this is the method that we could refine further, and maybe we can use these data for as direct input for our crop model, Volvost, for instance, as my colleague has shown you. Will show you.
Thank you so far. As you have seen, we have developed code for analyzing NDVI values. We have taken this code and put it in a Python script, and the next demonstration is about how we use that Python script in the virtual research environment.
We have developed an algorithm, and what we did is we took the Python code of this algorithm and we put it in a script. The idea is that that script can then be applied to many more data, so that the supercomputer can do its crunching of data, and it can find those phenology points, those dates for many fields, not just for one. So here we are in the home page of the VRE, the Agro-Climatic Modeling VRE, and in order to run our algorithm that we have extracted and put in a script, we are going to the data miner. So we say, okay, we want to execute an experiment, and as we know, we are doing crop phenology analysis, and we have here this NDVI curve fitter. So this is the algorithm, and we have installed it on the virtual research environment. We will look for a file that can be input for this. So this is a file with a number of parcels, and it's for the year 2018. So okay, we have to give a file with a token, so that the AgroData Cube will accept the request that the script is going to do. And again, we are going to calculate for the year 2018. The 256 going to run it. So we say start the computation. Then the supercomputer will start it, and it is going to run for about 10 parcels, which are in this file. So now, hopefully everything will go well. Yeah, green. That's good. So it has It has produced files. These are the computation log files. Well, once we have a green color here, we just look at the results. It has downloaded the results, and I'm going to open this file. So this is CSV, and for the 11 parcels in this in the that had sugar beets in the file, it has found the emergence. It has of the start of season. It has found the canopy closure. It has found the maximum NDVI, and it has found also the harvest date. But of course, we are interested to calculate this for many more parcels. So, what we did, we took the whole of the Netherlands, and we made files like the ones we use as input for this. And I'm going to show you now how we did that. We made another algorithm. This is the algorithm that can cut up the whole, can divide the country into smaller pieces, and then for each of those pieces it will produce the same kind of input file. And the good thing is that the result from this algorithm here can then be input for this algorithm, and this algorithm can allocate the different calculation jobs to different computers in the VRE cluster. So it is a way to distribute the computing and to make it possible to do those calculations within a reasonable time. I think it will be a bit time consuming to show this, because the parcels are about 30,000 in number, but I believe you understand how it works. In the background, the same NDVI curve fitter algorithm is invoked. So in the end, we get a lot of data like the ones we saw with the days in the year. So for the whole country, we were able to make those calculations, and we got to know those dates for all the parcels. Here you can see a map. The sugar beets are grown in particular areas of the country, as you can see. So the yellow colors mean that the emergence was late, and if the colors are dark, then the emergence was rather early, which is a bit strange, but we'll have to ask an agronomist to explain that to us more. So I think this is a nice result, and I think we'll leave it here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for this explanation. In the meantime, we have questions coming in. The more, let's say, content-related ones we'll leave for after the demonstrations, but I want to answer some of the other questions. There are quite some questions about the presentation, if it will become available after the webinar, or the webinar itself will be available after the webinar to see. And also that some of the links were kind of passing too quick or not very visible. So yes, we will upload the presentation to the page that you're currently using. First of all, we will also send out a mail, like I said to you, first of all to ask you for the evaluation, but also including the information that you need to see back the presentation and to get to the links. So yeah, I think that's for now the thing that I want to say about the questions on that subject. Everything will be available on the web after the webinar. Then I'd like to give the word to Rob Knapen for another demonstration.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so before we start, there was also a question about the crop model, of it being open source or not. So the WOFOS crop model that's being used, there are different implementations of it available, and one is actually open source. It's a Python version called PCSE, the plant crop, do you know the plant crop simulation environment, I think?
Yeah.
Which is available on GitHub, so everybody can download that. And there are several other implementations. One is in Fortran, which is the original one, I think, dated many years from many years ago. And there's a more recent Java implementation, which is used, which we've used in this project. And one of its uses is to run this model to do a single crop simulation on the virtual research environment, which I've explained in the next demo. And in this data miner functionality, there are several options. We'll look here at executing an experiment. And then here you could see we have this category crop model, which was the name I've entered when publishing it, publishing the algorithms. So if you expand this list, you could see that here we have this crop simulation for field model, which is now has been published into this data miner platform. And if you click on it, it will show you these default values that you remember from the previous screen where I entered these into the system. And then, because these are kind of sensible values for a single crop field simulation, so we can just start it here, start computation. But you might edit them. In this case, you would need to know the identifiers for these crop fields. But you can look them up, but this is basically for demo purposes only. So in the end, you would have more convenient ways to look up crop field IDs or select a crop field. Anyway, we'll start the computation. Since this is a single crop field, it shouldn't take too long, but what will happen now is that the model will be started on the infrastructure and run, and then coming back it will gather the results from the computing node the model has run on and show them here in this user interface. And then you can click on the various items. So you can see the log of the computation, which is not, in this case, not very interesting, but you quickly see that all the things that happen for running this crop simulation. So it has looked up the field and collected weather data that are needed, ran the simulation, and returned the results. In this case, all went correct, so the computation was completed successfully. And you can have a look at the states. So these are the crop simulation states that were calculated by the WOFOS model. But this is a long list because it's basically a CSV file with daily states of many variables. In the summary, it also creates a short summary, which is a JSON file that has some main variables produced by the crop model. But this is also available. So that's quickly running one model. So these are the files visible in the user interface, but you can also go back to the workspace. So click on My Workspace, and here you can see that there's a specific folder created by this data miner platform, which keeps a record of all the computations that you run. So this is good for provenance and transparency of basically any algorithm or experiment that you run on the platform, and the data that you later want to, or experiments that you later want to repeat or share with other people. So in here, computations, you can see that I did some experiments already, but this one is from just a few minutes ago. So in this folder, you can see this is basically the provenance record, which is an XML file that contains the information about all the inputs that were collected in the user interface, but also the data used and the information about the outputs created. So basically this XML file is enough to repeat the run of the model. And then you could go into
the output data set, and here you still have access to these files.
All right. So that was a little demonstration of publishing and running a single crop simulation model and how to retrieve the data back and the provenance information from the data miner folder. So publishing an algorithm also makes it available as a web service, as a WPS, web processing service. So that it can be used from applications which can be both in the virtual research environment but also external. So, and how we've used this in the VRE itself is by creating this the visualization dashboard, which combines both data, input data from the Argo Data Cube and output data from the model. And this dashboard was actually developed by the University of Athens and made available as a service in the virtual research environment. And how it works is explained in the next demo.
This model that I showed you, after importing, it has this web processing service interface. And as an example of how we use that is this Argo Data Cube dashboard, which is basically a visualization, a dashboard visualization, which is now included into this virtual research environment, but it could be an external application as well. So in this dashboard environment, I can't open an existing file because I'm on a different computer, but so we could look up here. If you zoom in far enough, at some point you can fetch crop fields, so the data which is coming from an external web service. So it takes some time to load that. And here you can see that we have some fields. Let's click on one here. And it will retrieve some additional information. So these are basically the crop. It's a maize crop. The names are in Dutch, but it's a arable land maize crop. You can see the code, the Dutch crop code for it. We're in year 2018. So that's basic field information. You can look at the altitude. You can look at the soil information for this field. So you can see the different types of soil in this field with all the details that you would want. And this is based on the Dutch soil map. So unfortunately, all the names are in Dutch as well. We should definitely work on translation or using more the semantic tools to get different translations of all these names. And the other thing to look at is the crop history. So it will look at the point in this field and look at all the different crops that have been grown at that location in different years. So basically this is maize, all maize, and types of grassland. But you could have a look at, for different fields, you could look up this information using this dashboard. There's also time series data, so we have weather data for this field. This is mean temperature, well, sunshine duration on this. So it looks at the nearest weather station for this field that it has and returns that type of information. And the other thing is that we have the vegetation index, NDVI, calculated from satellites, Sentinel satellites. And here, so this is the average NDVI over the year for this, measured for this field. And you can see the sequence in the crop. So this is the crop growth, and this is probably a cover crop used. So this is basically lookup information, and then this run crop simulation takes the information for this field and uses this web processing service to start the model run. And it's basically the same model run that I've showed before, running it directly from data miner. Again, this will take some time, and then so elapsed days is not so interesting, but here you could see the temperature data that used, the model was used by the model, various other variables, soil moisture, here is the leaf area index. So this is the simulated leaf area index, and what the model does now is just calculate for potential crop growth, so it doesn't take into account the soil information yet, but that's for a future version. But using these tools you could basically compare different fields in the Netherlands and compare the inputs and the data for it and the resulting simulation outputs. And then use it by if you want to use it with external clients, so like QGIS or any application that you build yourself or a mobile application. There's a token-based authorization, so not everybody can use it freely, but you need to be need to have an account on the VRE. But after that, you could use all the algorithms that are published in this VRE.
So this was the dashboard was based on running the single crop simulation, and of course to try out the full infrastructure or the computational cluster that is available behind the virtual research environment. The more interesting step would be to see how many of these crop simulations this cluster could run distributedly or in parallel. And for that we needed to develop a few more algorithms and get them to run, which is explained in the next demo.
Just to show you how, of course, running the models is one thing, but it's also nice if you could to share these results with other users that are in the same workspace or maybe in different VREs. Sharing the crop field run for a province might not be the most sensible demo, but this is just to show that you can go in here, and if you use right click on this folder in this case, so the folder has all the information about this run. Here you could say publish on catalog, and then you get the chance to add this information, this set of files, to the catalog of the VRE. Let's now go with the default name, although it's not so telling. So you can add a title and description, add some text here. So this was Limburg maize in 2018. So tags make it easier for people to discover the information later on. You could select the VRE that it should be accessible in. You can select visibility, let's stay restricted since it's a demo, but you can also make it, like I said, you can also make it publicly available. Author is me. Type, we'll say dataset. Okay, dataset, continue. And then you see here, I can select which output, which files I actually want to publish. So go with this. This is the provenance record that I've shown, and output. This is the HTML output in the report. So let's select those. Continue here, and here you could see author. It's still me. And then I can indicate here, I can indicate the region, the spatial region. So this is just later on in the catalog. You can that's one. You could also do spatial search, so find data sets for a specific region that you might be interested in. So okay, so this will just be very roughly. A lot more, it seems like a lot more than just the Limburg province, but for the demo. And then here, so that's the bounding area spatially, and here I can look up maize as a term. So this is semantic information that I'm adding to this data set, also for later discoverability of the data set. So This is one concept, but there can be more. We'll stick with one in this case, and then say create. So now, as you see, it published the information into the catalog of the VRE, and there's also already a link, so I can go there, and then you can see the item that I've just published in this catalog. So this is the catalog of all the data sets and models, so you can basically publish anything and make it available to other users. And here you can see the data set that we've just published with the bounding box and all the other information ready for other people to have a look at. And they can also give this data set a rating. So of course I'm thinking it's really good. But yeah, also lots of information here, licenses for use, and many other fields. And these lists are basically flexible, so you could add more information to it if it's relevant. So it ends up in the complete catalog, and other people can retrieve this information quite easily this way. And that's it for my demos. So thank you for listening.
So interestingly enough, that was actually the demo about publishing in the catalog. So even with having recordings, nothing with technology always works perfect. So then in the final demo, this will actually be running the crop simulations on the cluster.
So this was all for running a single crop simulation, but you can also see that I've built algorithms for running simulations for multiple fields. And this is basically, it's the same type of algorithm, only this one accepts a list of field IDs, and this list can be long, so it can be thousands of fields to run simulations for. And then I have two types of algorithms that can create batches of these, basically can create these lists and start many instances of this algorithm. So that way, using the infrastructure, the typical D4Science infrastructure with the web processing service capabilities, I can use it to run many crop simulations basically at the same time. So this algorithm would take the list of field IDs, and once it's started on a computer in the cluster, it will run all these, try to run all these crop simulations for all these fields in parallel on that computer. So it's basically creating a high CPU load on one system. And then this is basically a scheduling algorithm that creates, looks at which crop simulations to run, so the complete workload, and divide them into sublists, basically, and start the other algorithm for each sublist. And this one will try to start as many of those algorithms as possible. So in the end, if many computers in the cluster are available, it will try to take as much of them as possible, basically. And requests that have to wait will end up in a queue and be started by the infrastructure at a later time. But this one basically does the batching and controlling of the running of the various instances of the other model. And you can see I've created, for the demo purpose, I've created two types. One where you can actually select a region. So to quickly show this one, here you could basically, once the map is loaded, you could select, it's coming from another server, so it takes some time to load. Here you could basically select all of the Netherlands and use that, so you get a bounding box for the Netherlands in this case. But that would select all the crop fields in this case in 2018, and here we could do select the crop code for maize. So this would select all the crop fields with maize in 2018 in the Netherlands, and try to run the simulations for them, which would be like 50,000 or something between 50 and 80,000 if I'm not wrong. And then you can still indicate how big the batches can be and the maximum amount of batches to run. So this will stop when it has started 10,000 crop simulations. But you can make the numbers larger, and this is basically a trade-off of how to divide the workload over the cluster. It's something that we're still experimenting with. What are the ideal values of for these settings? You can see that I've indicated a first range. So if you go above 3,000, then you're overloading basically one computer, and the total calculation time won't be optimal, let's say. So this basically is a very large task, a large workload, so I won't show it. It will take I think 10 minutes to complete. But we can do a smaller version. So let's start this one for Limburg, which is a Dutch province, and also do maize. And then I will just reduce the just do a few batches. So let's do 500 crop parcels maximum. You can see that you can also set the total calculation time when it will. If it exceeds the calculation time, it will stop running. And now basically we have to wait until the calculations are done. Hopefully shouldn't take too long. So I can tell a little bit what happening in the background. You can see that's the status information. So 10% basically is like initial startup, and at some point it will start loading all the figuring out all the crop fields that I've selected. So all the crop fields in this province, using the boundary box of the province for the province, and selecting maize. So that's basically what it has done when it's at 50%. And now it's dividing, scheduling all the other algorithms. It's starting all the other algorithms on the platform. So basically it's kind of a map reduce type of processing. So now it's basically mapping all the lists, all the crop field IDs into these other algorithms, and starting them and they will take some time to run. And after that the cluster will come back with the results, which are then by this algorithm it will summarize over all the results it gets, and it will also have a look at all the basically it will inspect all the log files that are created and look for error messages, and also collect those. So it looks for error messages and warnings, and already collects that type of information and to present them to the agronomist that will be running this model this way. So here it's done. Luckily it completed successfully, it says. So then you can have a look at the log file if you're interested, but most interesting basically is this processing report that it automatically creates, which gives you or gives the user a kind of a high-level overview of the work done. So you can see here that it has resize a bit more. So you can see the parameters that it used, these 500 crop fields that we have simulated, and this is basically the overview of all the batches. There were no errors and no warnings, so everything went well. And then it shows some significant values for each batch. And this is just the first list. Of course, you can do much more with the information that it creates. And it also has links to the detailed log files and pieces of the crop simulations for each batch. So you can actually, from this report, you can drill down into the results. And like I've showed you, these files are available on the workspace. So you can not only use this HTML report to access the data, but you can afterwards you can also go back into your workspace and have a closer look at all the output files that have been created by this.
Okay, thanks Steven and Rob for your demonstrations. Well, first of all, I would like to emphasize again the fact that we will ask you to fill in evaluation, which we'll send by mail. The other thing is that quite some questions have been coming in during the webinar, and we will, in the last 10 minutes of this presentation, pick out some of those questions and try to answer them. I don't think we have enough time for all the questions, so there seem to be a manageable amount to answer afterwards for the ones that we cannot answer now. So let's agree that we come back to the ones that we do not answer in this session. I would like to start with a question posed by Jacques Wolfert. He asks, what is the business model behind the VRE? Do you have to pay for the service, and who's maintaining it after the AGINFRA Plus project? Those are very relevant questions. So I think the business model in the end behind the VRE is that you use it for open science, and it's always hard to find let's say financial means to support that. But you have to pay for the service. In this project, of course, it's been paid through the project. We have an agreement with the consortium that we're keeping the VREs live for a certain period after the project, which is also covered. If you want to start a VRE like this, then you will have to get in touch with the provider of the VRE. It's currently hosted by CNR in Italy. And you can, let's say, agree the service license agreement with them. So I'm not sure if that's fully answering the question, but that's how it currently works. So it's not for free. But I think costs are manageable. So there are some questions about the model and the NDVI procedures, which I'll pass to my colleagues, at least partly. One question from Nimai Senapati is, why is the NDVI so low during March-May? Steven, can you say something about that?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question. In that period, it is spring in the Netherlands, and the temperatures are still relatively low after the winter, so there aren't many weeds growing there. We are probably looking at bare soil at that time, and that is the explanation that the values are still low, because there is hardly any green on the field at that point.
Staying with Steven, another question about NDVI is about cloud coverage, and the question is, are the NDVI free of clouds?
Okay. As you may have seen, we use two data sources. That is the Agro-Data Cube and on the other hand the Sentinel Hub. I think in the demo already it was explained that for the Agro-Data Cube we actually looked at each image, and the clouds were removed by hand. And that holds for the years 2017 and 2018. And recently we have developed a machine learning algorithm to remove the cloud pixels with the computer, and with similar accuracy. So the images for Agro-Data Cube, they are almost completely free of cloud pixels. And there's, of course, also a filtering done by the people providing Sentinel Hub data, but their filtering is not as good as the Agro-Data Cube filtering. So, yes, Agro-Data Cube images are almost free of clouds, and therefore the data also.
Okay, thanks. There are several questions about the ability to use other crop models in the VRE, and also to use the current crop model for specific countries. We have a question from India and from Georgia. We also got a previous question from the Philippines. I think the short but incomplete answer is yes, you can. But I think in this case it's good that we get in touch with the individual people that ask those questions, because of course there's some work involved, and you need to know some things around, let's say, how to prepare the data for a model and how to make it, let's say, fit for an environment. For example, if you want to do parallel computing. Another question, again from Jacques Wolfert, is how does the VRE relate to other collaboration environments? Of course, we have environments like Basecamp, GitHub. They're also offering collaboration functionality. So his question is: do you replace does the VRE replace these, or does it somehow combine? Can you say something about that, Rob Knapen?
Yes. So this is I think it's a very interesting and relevant question, but also to us that's kind of a bit of a search how these different tools, how they compete with each other or compare to each other. Of course, there's a difference between having a science environment that's developed with open source software and the more commercial varieties like GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft. So, and there's a difference in the amount of money that's being put into these competing environments. So, of course, they can develop much faster and they look more slick, obviously, than the D4Science tools. But yes, both have their merits, I guess, and I think the open science environments are nice to work on this in a collaborative spirit and have many people contribute to them, and then together these environments can grow and be beneficial to all specifically to researchers. So you're not involuntarily giving all your data away to, or maybe unknowingly giving all your data away to the big commercial companies. So yeah, that would be a benefit, I think, or benefits multiple. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Given the time, maybe the last question from the list that we have. Actually, two questions about the crop model again, so I'll pass them again to my colleague Rob Knapen. The first question is: how are the input data generated for crop modeling? And the second question is: what is the accuracy in computing crop yield in WOFOST?
Okay, so both are interesting. In this case, the crop model, we take all the inputs from the Argo data cube. So those are already, Argo data cube basically is a harmonized data set, so it's already prepared for this type of usage. So it can provide all the inputs. And of course, for other regions, Argo data cube is limited to the Netherlands in this case. And for other regions, yes, it will be a problem to bring to collect all the data. And there are worldwide data sources available, but yeah, it's a bit of work to prepare that. And the other question about the accuracy of the model, I know, I'm not the developer of the crop simulation model, so I know that's being calibrated based on historical data, but I wouldn't know what how the accuracy is expressed as in types of metrics, or so this is a bit of a question for myself too, how there are metrics for machine learning models, but are these metrics or similar metrics also available for the more mechanistic types of models, simulation models? So I think we should look up the exact answer to this question.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions. Yes, we're at the end of this webinar. I would mention once again the evaluation that we will send to you. We'll also send to you some of the relevant links and the link to the presentation, so you can review the webinar. Other than that, I think we have had a good webinar where we were able to present the things we wanted to present. I hope you also enjoyed it. And well, if you have any questions, you can also always come to us for that. And like promised, we will react to all of the questions that we got in during the webinar later after the webinar. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.